Lucas Zane doesn't like delays, the hotel manager whispered nervously as he peeked into the grand ballroom, where a woman in cargo pants was standing on top of a ladder, adjusting a massive lighting rig like she owned the place. Lucas Zane, yes, that Lucas Zane stood just behind him, silent and unreadable in a sharply cut charcoal suit that probably cost more than the chandelier swaying above the woman's head. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face the press called impossibly perfect, but right now, his jaw was tight. The woman paused, wrenched one side of the beam, and called out to someone offstage. "Kill the main lights, I want to see the beam spread." Lucas took a step forward. "Who is she?" the manager fumbled. "She's, with the lighting crew. They were booked through the event planner." "I can have her moved if—" "No," Lucas said, his gaze still fixed on her. "Let her finish." The ballroom was being transformed for the annual Zane Foundation Gala, a centerpiece of New York's social calendar. Every detail was supposed to be flawless. Lucas didn't like surprises, but something about this woman held his attention in a way that surprised even him. She climbed down the ladder, her long black ponytail swinging behind her. She had a smudge of grease on her cheek and a tool belt slung around her hips. Definitely not one of the gala guests, he took a step forward as she turned and saw him. She froze. "Oh, she glanced at his suit, then at the hotel manager nervously hovering behind him. "Sorry, you probably weren't expecting someone to be dangling from your trusses this late." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "You're not exactly what I pictured when I heard lighting technician." She wiped her hands on her jeans and stuck one out. "Jessa Hartley. I run Hartley Lighting and Design." "We specialize in high-end events. You must be Mr. Zane." He shook her hand, firm grip, warm fingers. "Lucas." He was used to people being flustered around him. She wasn't. She looked him in the eye, unbothered, even with her hair a mess and her shirt half untucked. He found himself wondering what color her eyes were under the ballroom lights. "The lighting scheme you requested wasn't balanced," she said, crossing her arms. "Your event planner ordered a generic package, but your room has more reflective surfaces than they accounted for." "So I adjusted." Lucas blinked. "You adjusted my lighting." "I did," she said, not backing down. "You're welcome." His lips twitched. "You're bold," Jessa shrugged. "I don't like mediocre lighting." For a moment, there was nothing but the hum of the lights and the distant clatter of dishes being set in the kitchen. Then Lucas said, "Show me." "What?" "Show me what you did." She hesitated, then turned toward the control board. "Fine. But if you hate it, don't sue me." The lights dimmed. Then, slowly, the room came alive. Warm golds danced across the ceiling, cool whites lit the perimeter. The chandelier sparkled like a starburst, and subtle amber uplighting gave the entire room a glow that looked like it belonged in a movie. Lucas didn't say a word for several seconds. Jessa looked over, arms folded. "Well," he turned to her. "It's perfect," she blinked. "Oh, you're good," he added. "Really good." "Thanks," she said, cheeks tinged pink. Lucas stepped closer. "You're not like the usual vendors." "I get that a lot," she said dryly, then grabbed her tool case. "Anyway, I've got another rig to adjust. Enjoy your ballroom." "Wait." He caught her wrist gently. "Are you staying for the gala?" She gave a half laugh. "I'm the help. I'll probably be in the back, making sure nothing catches fire." Lucas smiled, actually smiled. "I'd rather you be out here." Jessa tilted her head. "Are you asking me to crash your $1 million fundraiser?" "I'm asking you to let me thank you properly. Come as my guest." She hesitated. I don't have a dress, or heels, or anything remotely gala-worthy." "I know a boutique," Lucas said casually. "It opens after hours for me. Let me take care of it." She looked at him like he'd offered her a trip to the moon. "You're serious?" "Yes," Jessa narrowed her eyes. "Why?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he said, "You didn't flinch when I walked in. You challenged my lighting choices. That doesn't happen often." She laughed softly. "So this is about lighting?" "No," he said. "This is about the woman who just turned my ballroom into something unforgettable." She stared at him, caught between disbelief and intrigue. Then, slowly, she said, "All right. One night. But I'm not promising anything more than showing up." Fair enough, Lucas said, already pulling out his phone to make a call, but I warn you I'm a very persuasive man. Yeah, Jessa raised a brow. We'll see about that. As she walked away, Lucas watched her disappear into the wings of the ballroom, already wondering what it was about her that made everything else, the gala, the speeches, the business deals, suddenly seem less important. He didn't know it yet, but he'd just met the woman who would change everything. The woman who, against every expectation, was going to make him fall in love. What do you mean you're sending a car? Jessa yelped, hopping on one foot as she tried to pull on the only pair of heels she owned, scuffed black pumps she hadn't worn since her cousin's wedding 2 years ago. I thought this was just a dress drop-off. Plans changed, said the voice on the other end of the line. The woman had introduced herself as Yvonne Lucas's assistant and sounded like she ran covert operations for a living. Mr. Zane asked me to ensure you're escorted to the gala. The driver's downstairs. Jessa stared at the clock, 40 minutes until the event. Her hair was still slightly damp from the shower, makeup barely started, and now there was a chauffeured car waiting. She hung up, nearly tripping over a box by her front door. Inside was a gown. Not just any gown, a floor-length, midnight blue silk creation that shimmered like water when she touched it. The plunging neckline was balanced by delicate, sheer sleeves, and the back dipped just enough to feel daring without being ridiculous. The tag had no price. Of course it didn't. She zipped it up, eyes wide at her own reflection. The dress fit like it had been sewn for her. When she stepped into the hallway, the driver held the door without a word, and the moment she slid into the back of the sleek black car, she realized this wasn't simply a thank you gesture. Lucas Zane was trying to tilt the axis of her world. The gala roared to life the moment she stepped into the ballroom. Strings played above the murmur of conversation and the clinking of glasses. Waiters moved like choreography, and overhead, her lighting design cast the entire space in a soft, cinematic glow. Then she saw him. Lucas stood at the base of the grand staircase, speaking with a woman in a sharp white blazer and silver stilettos, but the moment he looked up and saw her, his entire posture changed. His hand dropped from the flute of champagne he'd been holding, and the woman beside him paused mid-sentence, following his gaze. Jessa descended slowly, unsure if it was the heels or the weight of all that attention. As she reached the last step, Lucas was already there. "You're stunning," he said simply. "I almost didn't come," she replied, her voice steadier than she expected. "I'm glad you did," he said, offering his arm. "There's someone I want you to meet." She hesitated. "You don't have to parade me around like a trophy." Lucas turned to her. "I don't do that, ever. I just want you to know you're welcome here." She studied him for a beat, then nodded and took his arm. "All right. Lead the way." He guided her through the crowd with quiet confidence, stopping only when they reached a group near the back of the room. An older man with a silver beard and a navy tux nodded at Lucas. "Jessa, this is Malcolm Raines. He's on the board of the Zane Foundation." "Malcolm, this is Jessa Hartley. She's responsible for making this place look better than any of us deserve." Malcolm extended a hand. "You're the one who fixed the lighting issues. Impressive." Jessa shook his hand. "Thank you, it was a team effort." Lucas interjected. "She's being modest. She made decisions in 10 minutes that elevated this entire event." Malcolm chuckled. "Well, I hope we see more of you." "We're always looking for talent that can think on their feet." Jessa thanked him, and they moved on. As they passed a table of donors, Lucas leaned in. "You handled that well." "I was internally screaming," she whispered. "So you're good at pretending," he said, amused. "I've had practice." They reached the open bar. Lucas waved off the bartender's offer. "Club soda?" "Not drinking," she asked. "Not tonight." She accepted a glass of champagne and turned to face him. "So, is this your entire life? Galas, donors, careful introductions?" "Mostly," he admitted. "It's a machine. Events like this keep the gears turning." "And do you like it?" He looked around the room, then back at her. "No, but I like what it funds: scholarships, clinics, projects that matter." Jessa's expression softened. "I didn't expect that." "Most don't," he said. They see the cars and the suits. They don't ask what's underneath. She sipped her drink. So what is underneath? Lucas studied her. You first, she laughed. Fine. I grew up in a 3-bedroom house with 4 siblings and a mom who worked double shifts for 15 years. I was the weird kid who took apart the toaster just to see how it lit up. I got into lighting because it made sense when nothing else did. He leaned against the bar, watching her closely. You're not afraid to be honest. I don't lie well, she replied. And I don't have the energy to pretend I'm someone I'm not. Lucas nodded slowly, as if that meant more to him than she realized. That's rare. Before she could respond, a photographer approached. Mr. Zane, may I get a shot of the two of you? Jessa stiffened. Lucas glanced at her. Only if you're comfortable. She hesitated a beat, then nodded. Okay. They stood side by side. Lucas's hand rested lightly on her back, his touch warm through the silk. The photographer snapped the shot, thanked them, and disappeared into the crowd. Jessa turned to him. You know that's going to be everywhere tomorrow. Let it, he said. You don't even know me. I know enough, he answered, his voice low, and I want to know more. Before she could respond, a woman in emerald earrings and a gown that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover approached. Lucas, she said, her voice honeyed. You didn't tell me you were bringing someone. Lucas straightened, suddenly formal. Talia, this is Jessa Hartley. Talia gave a tight smile. The lighting tech, of course. Jessa returned a polite nod. Pleasure? I'm sure, Talia murmured, then turned to Lucas. We need to discuss the Westmont proposal. Privately, Lucas's jaw tightened. Now's not the time. Talia's eyes flicked to Jessa. I'll wait. As she walked away, Jessa raised an eyebrow. Friend of yours? Lucas said. And a board member. She still thinks proximity equals influence. Jessa set her glass down. Do you want me to go? No, Lucas said firmly. I asked you here for a reason. And what reason is that? He looked at her, something unreadable behind his eyes. Because when you walked into that room, everything else stopped mattering. Jessa's breath caught, not just at the words, but at how genuinely he said them. And for the first time that night, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just a one-time thing. Jessa hadn't expected to end the night on the rooftop of the Zane Grand, barefoot, with the skyline glittering around her like a promise. Lucas had noticed her discomfort after the run-in with Talia. Without a word, he'd guided her out of the ballroom, past the velvet ropes and through a private elevator that required his thumbprint. The doors had opened to an open-air terrace lit by soft string lights and the faint glow of the city beneath them. Now she stood at the edge, her heels abandoned beside a planter, the hem of her gown brushing the stone floor. Lucas leaned against the railing, his jacket discarded, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing the sharp lines of his forearms and a silver watch that caught the light when he moved. You always keep a rooftop to yourself, she asked, hugging her arms against the breeze. I don't usually bring anyone up here, he said. She glanced at him, unsure how to take that. He continued, When I was a kid, I used to sneak onto the roof of our building. It was the only place that felt mine. Jessa tilted her head. You had a roof. I had a treehouse made out of splintered plywood, half a floor, no walls, and a ladder that broke if you breathed near it. Lucas laughed quietly. Sounds like a death trap. It was perfect, she said. You couldn't see the ground. That made it feel like anything was possible. A silence stretched between them, not awkward, just full. Then Lucas said, I saw you when you walked into that ballroom. But I think I really noticed you when you didn't care who I was. I knew who you were, Jessa said. I just didn't care what that meant. He looked over. That's what I meant. She stepped away from the edge. You're not what I expected either. Lucas raised an eyebrow. How so? I thought you'd be just another man in a suit, polished, careful, maybe a little bored with everything, but you actually pay attention. You listen. He watched her for a moment, then said, Most people only listen when they're waiting for their turn to speak. She gave a soft laugh. You're not wrong. Lucas pushed off the railing. Come with me. Where now? She asked, wary. You'll see, he said, offering his hand. She hesitated, then took it. He led her down a narrow staircase tucked behind the rooftop garden. They descended into a quiet hallway that ended at a solid black door. Lucas pulled out a key card, swiped it, and opened the door into a space unlike anything Jessa had seen. It wasn't a suite. It was an entire floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the perimeter, revealing the city stretching into the night. A grand piano sat near the center, untouched. The furniture was sleek but lived in. A jacket had been tossed onto a chair. A coffee mug sat beside a stack of papers on a low table. "This is where you live?" she asked. "When I'm in the city," he said. "It's quieter up here." Jessa wandered to the window. "You could live anywhere." "I don't like moving around," he said. "I've had enough of that." She turned to face him. "How do you go from rooftop sneaking to owning half of Manhattan?" Lucas sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped. "I built a software company when I was 22, sold it at 27. I didn't grow up with much. Once I had the money, I started building things that couldn't be taken away." Jessa stepped slowly into the room. "Is that what all this is?" He looked up at her. "Most people want things they can show off. I wanted things that made me feel safe." Her voice softened. "You don't strike me as someone who's afraid." "I'm not afraid of failure," he said. "I'm afraid of forgetting who I was before the money." Jessa sat beside him, not touching but close. "You're still him. You just have better lighting now." That earned a quiet laugh from him. "You always this good with metaphors." "I'm a lighting designer. We live and die by metaphor." Lucas leaned back, studying the ceiling. "There's something about you." "I get that a lot," she teased. "No," he said. "I mean it. You walked into my world like it didn't intimidate you. And you made it better without asking for permission." "I didn't think I needed it," she said, then added, "but I didn't expect to end up here either." He turned his head, watching her. "Would you have said no if you'd known?" "I might have been more prepared," she said. "But I don't think I would have said no." Lucas reached out, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "Good." Jessa's breath caught, then she said, "You know this can't be a casual thing." "I wasn't planning for it to be," he said. She studied him. "I don't have the kind of life that fits into this." She motioned around the penthouse. "I work crazy hours, I haul equipment, I don't own anything that requires dry cleaning." "I don't care about any of that," Lucas said. "I care that you see me." She exhaled slowly. "I do." "That's the problem." He leaned in, stopping just short of her lips. "Say the word." She didn't. Instead, she kissed him first. It wasn't polished, it wasn't practiced, it was real. When they pulled apart, their foreheads resting together, Lucas said, "I've never brought anyone here before." Jessa whispered, "That makes two of us." They stayed like that, suspended in a moment that didn't need explaining. But outside the window, the city kept moving, unaware that something irreversible had just begun. Jessa stood frozen in the entryway of the gallery, her arms wrapped around a clipboard she hadn't meant to bring. It had been 3 weeks since the gala and the night that made everything change, and now she was staring at her lighting rig being disassembled by a team she didn't recognize. Not hers. "Ma'am, you'll need to step back," said a technician in a red polo, waving her off as he unhooked one of the custom filters she'd hand-trimmed herself. "We're under contract with the client." "I am the client," Jessa replied, her voice sharper than she intended. "Not anymore," said a woman stepping out from behind a stack of crates. Perfect hair, ice blonde, Talia. Jessa's pulse kicked up, but she kept her voice level. "This is Hartley Lighting's project. The Zane Foundation booked us 6 months ago. Lucas signed a contract with our firm last week," Talia replied coolly. "We're streamlining all vendor relationships. It's nothing personal." Jessa's fingers clenched around the clipboard. "He didn't tell me. He's had priorities," Talia said, feigning sympathy. "I'm sure you understand how busy he is." Jessa's chest tightened, but she didn't blink. "Of course, he's got a lot of people handling things for him." Talia leaned in. "People who are actually part of his world." Jessa didn't respond. She didn't have to. She turned and walked out of the gallery without another word. She didn't cry. She didn't even breathe until she hit the stairwell and took the steps 2 at a time until she reached the street. She didn't call Lucas. She didn't need to. If he'd wanted her to know, she would have known. By the time she reached her studio, her assistant, Renee, was already waiting. "There's a delivery," Renee said, frowning as she stepped aside to reveal an enormous crate stamped with Lucas's company logo. Jessa didn't move. "Send it back." "But send it back," Renee hesitated. "You sure it's marked urgent? Then he can tell me in person." The next morning he did. She was on a ladder, rewiring a dimmer panel in the ceiling of a midtown hotel, when a familiar voice echoed through the space. "Is there a reason my apology is sitting in a loading dock?" Jessa didn't look down. "Is there a reason your foundation replaced my contract without a single word?" Lucas moved closer. "You think I knew about that, did you not?" "I didn't sign anything. Talia did." She pushed it through under the foundation's discretionary clause. He paused. "I found out this morning, that's why I'm here," Jessa exhaled. "You could have called. I wanted to say it to your face." She climbed down slowly and turned to him. "You said I saw you. But did you ever really see me?" Lucas stepped forward, but she held up a hand. "I'm not a charity case or a novelty or someone you can thank with a dress and a rooftop view. I never thought you were. I work twice as hard for half the recognition. I've built every inch of this business from scratch, and I don't need someone stepping in to fix things behind closed doors." Lucas's voice softened. "You think that's what I was doing? I don't know, that's the problem." He ran a hand through his hair. "I should have told you. I've been dealing with a lot behind the scenes: foundation politics, board pressure, expansion talks, but none of that excuses shutting you out. You let someone else decide my worth." Lucas shook his head. "I didn't, but I see how it looks. And I hate that you're standing here thinking I ever saw you as anything less than extraordinary." She crossed her arms. "Then prove it." He met her gaze. "I already did." He pulled a folded document from the inside of his jacket and held it out. She didn't take it. "It's a grant," he said. "Under your name, for independent creative designers, fully funded. You pick the recipients, you set the terms, no strings." Jessa stared at him. "Why?" "Because your work deserves more than a contract. It deserves a legacy. And because I want to build something real with you, not just moments, but a future." She took the paper slowly, scanning it. Her name was there, in the title, in the mission. "But only if you want it," Lucas added. "All of it, not just the grant." "Me?" Jessa looked up. "You're really bad at being a millionaire," he blinked. "That's not where I thought this was going. You're supposed to be smooth, untouchable, mysterious. But here you are, standing in a warehouse with a rolled-up contract and paint on your shoes." He glanced down. "I stepped in something outside." She laughed despite herself. "I should make you climb a ladder for this." "I would," he said, "if that's what it takes." She folded the contract and tucked it into her bag. "You're lucky I like stubborn men." Lucas stepped closer. "Is that a yes?" "It's a maybe," she said, but her smile gave her away. That night she didn't go back to her apartment. She went with him, not to the penthouse, not to the rooftop. To a quiet brownstone in Brooklyn, where Lucas had kept the first couch he ever bought and where the floors still creaked when you stepped too close to the kitchen. It wasn't about chandeliers or champagne. It was about something real. Weeks passed. The gallery reinstated her contract. The grant launched, and one evening, under a canopy of string lights at a garden party hosted in Jessa's newly expanded studio, Lucas stood beside her, holding a glass of sparkling cider and watching her laugh with a group of interns. "This is better than the ballroom," he said. She turned, her hand slipping into his. "That's because you're not trying to impress anyone." "I am," he said. You already did." He leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers. "Then let me do it every day," and she let him. Because in a city of spotlights and illusions, she'd found the one man who saw her in the dark and chose to stay. Jessa adjusted her headset and stared out at the cluster of white tents rising along the edge of the Hudson, watching as a team tested the final wave of light across the stage. The summer showcase was less than 2 hours from opening, the first major event funded by the new grant, and everything from the glass-blown installations to the projection-mapped sculptures had been designed by the up-and-coming artists she'd personally selected. She stepped back as a drone camera whirred overhead, capturing the golden haze of late afternoon light. It was a moment she'd dreamed of creating for others. The kind of moment she never thought she'd be able to fund, let alone headline. "You're pacing," said a deep voice behind her. She turned and Lucas was there, dressed not in a suit, but in a charcoal button-down with the sleeves rolled up and a pair of dark jeans. He looked comfortable, even relaxed, which was rare. "Not pacing," she said. "Just preemptively troubleshooting." "There's nothing to fix," he said. "It's exactly what you wanted." "Exactly what I wanted would involve me not sweating through this shirt." Lucas brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You're radiant." "That's because I'm standing under a 600-watt spotlight," she replied, rolling her eyes. "No," he said. "You're radiant because you built all of this. You gave people a stage. You didn't just light the room, you made space for everyone else to shine." She looked past him, toward the artists milling around, some adjusting final touches to their pieces, others just soaking in the moment. "I didn't do it alone." "I know," he said, "but you were the reason it happened." Her voice softened. "I still don't really understand how you're okay with not being the center of attention." "I've been the center long enough," he said. "You make it easier to want something different." Jessa looked up at him. "You ever miss it, the spotlight?" He shook his head. "I miss simpler things, like not having to guard every move, but no, I don't miss being alone in a room full of applause." She didn't say anything for a moment. "Then, I used to think I'd always be behind the curtain, that I'd never be someone who belonged out front." "You never needed a spotlight," he said. "You just needed someone to stop dimming yours." There was a pause, long and full of something unspoken between them, until a stage-hand waved her over from the lighting booth. "Go," Lucas said. "I'll be here." She hesitated for a beat, then kissed his cheek. "Thank you for staying out of the way." "I'm learning," he said, watching her walk off. The showcase began as the sun set. Lucas watched from the back of the crowd as Jessa took the stage briefly, her words clear and confident, introducing the artists without needing to mention herself. The crowd was engaged, moved, excited not just by the installations, but by the energy Jessa had built into the entire experience. Later, as the event wound down and the final applause faded, Lucas found her beside a sculpture made of floating mirrored panels, bathed in shifting colored light. "You want to know something crazy?" she said as he approached. "Always," he replied. "I didn't think I'd be nervous tonight, but I was, not because I thought it would fail, but because it didn't feel like something I deserved." He frowned. "Why would you think that?" "Because for a long time I let myself believe my work only mattered if someone else said it did." Lucas stepped in front of her, placing both hands on her waist. "You don't need permission to be brilliant." "I know that now," she said. "But it helps having someone beside me who reminds me when I forget." He leaned in. "I love you, Jessa," she blinked. "That's the first time you've said that." "I know," he said. "I wanted it to be after something real, not a rooftop or a ballroom. After something we built together." Her voice was quiet. "I love you too." He kissed her slowly, not rushed, not for show, just real. The crowd around them had begun to thin, the night cooling, the city lights blinking across the water. Neither of them moved. Later, he walked her home, their fingers laced, her heels dangling from her other hand. Outside her building, she looked up at him. "You're not getting in a car, are you?" "No driver tonight," he said. "I'm staying." She unlocked the door and pulled him inside. Weeks turned to months. The grant expanded. Jessa hired more staff, trained her team to run without her always at the helm. She began mentoring other young designers, not just in lighting, but in building businesses. Lucas shifted more of his focus into the foundation, letting go of the boardroom grind he'd once convinced himself was necessary. They traveled not to the usual billionaire hideaways, but to cities where artists gathered, where ideas were being born in basements and rooftops and reclaimed warehouses. One morning, Jessa woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of birds through the open window of the brownstone. She padded barefoot into the kitchen to find Lucas leaning against the counter, reading through a grant proposal. "You're up early," she said, sliding her arms around his waist. He set the pages aside and kissed the top of her head. Couldn't sleep. Something on your mind, just thinking, he said. About how lucky I am, she pulled back. You know, you're not the only one who took a risk, he smiled. Tell me what you want next. She leaned against the counter beside him. Honestly, a garden, a real one with vegetables and wildflowers, maybe a dog. Lucas considered this. We could do that. He nodded. There's a house outside the city I've been looking at, not too far, big windows. Quiet, space to build whatever you want, she blinked. Are you asking me to move in with you? I'm asking you to build something permanent with me. She studied him for a long moment. All right. But only if I get to pick the dog. Deal. They sealed it with a kiss that tasted like morning and coffee and the kind of love that doesn't need chandeliers or galas to feel real. Years later, when people asked how it started, they'd laugh and say, with a ladder, a blown fuse, and a man who thought his ballroom was enough. And every time he'd add, then I met the woman who taught me what real light looks like. And she'd say, and I met the man who never needed saving. Just someone to see him. They built a life like that, and it was everything they never thought they could have.